The crack of a gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Wyoming Territory, 1875, making Olivia Barrett flinch as she placed the last of their dwindling supplies in the pantry. Not another fight, not tonight. Her husband Thomas would return home soon, his breath reeking of whiskey and his temper as volatile as nitroglycerin. Olivia's hands trembled as she tucked a loose strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. At 25, the vibrant girl who had once dreamed of adventure was now barely visible behind eyes dulled by years of cruel words and shattered hopes. The small homestead that had once represented their future together now felt like a prison. She caught her reflection in the small mirror hanging on the wall, a wedding gift from her mother. Her cheekbones were more prominent now, her face thinner. Thomas had called her beautiful once, in the beginning. Now he hardly looked at her except to criticize. The front door slammed open and Olivia's heart raced. Thomas swayed in the doorframe, his once handsome face contorted with anger. "Woman," he bellowed, throwing his hat to the floor, "where's my dinner?" "It's warming on the stove," Olivia replied softly, gesturing to the pot of stew she'd prepared hours ago. "I wasn't sure when you'd return." Thomas grunted, slumping into a chair at their small wooden table. "Tastes like dirt, I imagine. Everything you make does." Olivia served him silently, keeping her eyes downcast to hide the flash of hurt. She'd once been praised for her cooking back when she worked at her father's restaurant in St. Louis before meeting Thomas. "We're almost out of flour," she ventured carefully. "And coffee, too." "I thought perhaps tomorrow I could ride into town. With what money?" Thomas snarled, slamming his spoon down. "You think I'm made of dollars? That worthless plot-out back barely yields enough to feed us, let alone have extras. I could see about working at the general store, Mrs. Peterson mentioned no wife of mine is going to work for others while I'm alive," Thomas interrupted, his voice dangerously low. "What would people say? That Thomas Barrett can't provide, that he needs his worthless wife to earn his keep?" Worthless. The word cut deeper each time he used it. Once, twice, 1,000 times over their 7 years of marriage. "I just thought," Olivia began. "That's your problem," Thomas stood suddenly, sending his chair crashing backward. "You think too much, think you're too good for this life, too good for me." He stalked toward her, and Olivia instinctively backed away until she felt the wall behind her. "Thomas, please, you've been drinking." "Don't tell me what I've been doing," he growled, his face inches from hers. "You're nothing without me, Olivia, worthless, remember that." Later that night, as Thomas snored loudly in their bed, Olivia stared at the ceiling, tears silently tracking down her temples. Tomorrow would be their anniversary. 7 years since she'd left her family in St. Louis, full of hope and promise. 7 years of watching Thomas transform from a charming, ambitious man into this bitter shadow who blamed her for every disappointment. Morning came with an unusual silence. Olivia opened her eyes to find Thomas's side of the bed empty. Strange, he rarely rose before her. She dressed quickly and stepped into the main room to find a note scrawled on a piece of paper. "Gone to Carson City with Wilson. Back in 3 weeks. Don't waste all the supplies." Olivia stared at the note, a mix of relief and anxiety washing over her. 3 weeks alone. No harsh words, no walking on eggshells, but also no money and dwindling food. With newfound resolve, she gathered her few valuables, her mother's silver brooch and her grandmother's pearl earrings. These might fetch enough to buy supplies until Thomas returned. It wasn't ideal, but she had no choice. The ride into Sweetwater Creek took nearly 2 hours. The small but growing town had a bustling main street with a general store, saloon, bank, and a few other establishments. Olivia tied her horse outside the general store, smoothing her simple blue dress before entering. The familiar bell jingled as she stepped inside, and Mr. Peterson looked up from behind the counter, his kind eyes brightening. "Mrs. Barrett, haven't seen you in nearly a month. How are you faring?" "Well enough, Mr. Peterson," Olivia replied with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I was wondering if you might be interested in buying these." She carefully placed her jewelry on the counter. Mr. Peterson's expression softened with concern. "These are family pieces, are they not?" "Yes, but we're in need of supplies and Thomas is away on business." The lie came easily now after years of practice. Before Mr. Peterson could respond, the door opened and the bell jingled again. Olivia turned to see a tall man entering, dust covering his clothes from the trail. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the collar of his shirt, and his face was tanned from days under the sun. Despite the trail dust, there was something undeniably striking about him. "Ah, Mr. Valentine, perfect timing," Mr. Peterson called out. "Your order came in yesterday." The stranger tipped his hat politely to Olivia before addressing the shopkeeper. "Much obliged, Mr. Peterson, been waiting on those tools." Olivia turned back to her business, hoping to conclude it quickly. The fewer people who witnessed her selling family heirlooms, the better. "I can give you $15 for the lot," Mr. Peterson offered quietly. It was less than she'd hoped, but more than she'd expected. "That would be fine, thank you." As Mr. Peterson counted out the money, the stranger Mr. Valentine browsed nearby shelves. Olivia could feel his occasional glances, though he was clearly trying to be discreet. "Will there be anything else, Mrs. Barrett?" Mr. Peterson asked as he handed over the money. "Yes, I need flour, coffee, sugar," and her list was cut short by a commotion outside. The sound of galloping horses and men shouting drew everyone's attention. Olivia moved to the window, her heart dropping as she recognized one of the riders as Wilson, Thomas's drinking companion. If Wilson was back in town, where was Thomas? The door burst open and Wilson stumbled in, his face flushed with exertion. "Mrs. Barrett, there you are." "It's Thomas, there's been an accident at the mine." Olivia's blood ran cold. "What kind of accident is he?" "He's alive, but badly hurt. Cave-in at Carson City. They've brought him to Doc Miller's office." Without thinking, Olivia rushed out, forgetting her purchases and the money still clutched in her hand. Outside, she hesitated, realizing her horse was too tired for another journey across town at speed. "Mrs. Barrett," came a deep voice behind her. The stranger Mr. Valentine stood there, leading a sturdy black horse. "Take my horse, he's fresher than yours." "I couldn't possibly, please, I insist. I'll see to yours and bring your purchases to the doctor's office." Gratitude washed over her. "Thank you, Mr. Valentine, Daniel." "Daniel Valentine," he replied, helping her onto the horse. "Go on now." Olivia rode hard through town, her mind racing faster than the hoofbeats beneath her. Despite everything, Thomas was still her husband. For better or worse, she had made vows doctor. Miller's office was buzzing with activity when she arrived. She pushed her way through curious onlookers and found Thomas lying on a bed, his face ashen, a bloodied bandage wrapped around his head and chest. "Thomas," she whispered, approaching his side. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then narrowing as he recognized her. "Come to see if I'm dead yet," he rasped. Even now, his bitterness cut through. Olivia swallowed her hurt. "What happened?" Tunnel collapsed. "Would have died if not for Wilson pulling me out." He coughed, wincing in pain. "Doc says I've got broken ribs, maybe worse inside." Dr. Miller approached, his expression grave. "Mrs. Barrett, could I have a word?" In the hallway, the doctor's assessment was blunt. "Your husband has internal injuries. I've done what I can, but he needs more care than I can provide here. He should go to the hospital in Cheyenne." "Cheyenne? But that's days away by train. It's his best chance," the doctor insisted. "The next train leaves tomorrow morning." "It will cost $50 for the journey and initial hospital care." $50. The amount might as well have been $5,000 for all the possibility of Olivia producing it. The $15 from her jewelry wouldn't begin to cover it. "I understand," she said faintly. "I'll figure something out." When she returned to Thomas's bedside, his eyes were closed, his breathing labored. Despite everything, her heart ached for him, for the man he had been, for the life they had planned. "Your horse is tied up outside," came a voice from behind her. Daniel Valentine stood in the doorway, holding a parcel of her purchases. "And these are yours." "Mr. Valentine, thank you for your kindness," Olivia said, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. "Just Daniel, please." His eyes moved to Thomas's unconscious form. "How is your husband?" "Not good. He needs to get to Cheyenne for proper care." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "The train leaves tomorrow morning." "Yes, but," she trailed off, unwilling to admit their financial situation to a stranger. A look of understanding passed over Daniel's face. "Mrs. Barrett, I don't mean to overstep, but I own a small cattle ranch outside of town. I'm always in need of help with household matters while I'm out with the herd. If you're interested, the position pays well and includes room and board." Olivia stared at him in surprise. "Mr. Valentine, Daniel, we've only just met." "True enough. he acknowledged with a slight smile. "But Mrs. Peterson speaks highly of you, and it's clear you're in a difficult situation. It would be just temporary, of course, until your husband recovers." The offer was unexpected but felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Still, caution held her back. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to consider my husband's wishes. He doesn't approve of my working." Something flickered in Daniel's eyes, understanding, perhaps even anger, but his voice remained gentle. "The offer stands. I'll be in town until tomorrow noon if you change your mind." He tipped his hat and left, his tall frame disappearing through the doorway. That evening, as Olivia kept vigil by Thomas's bed, she confronted the harsh reality of their situation. The $15 from her jewelry wouldn't get Thomas to Cheyenne. Their homestead had no livestock to sell, no crops ready for harvest. They had nothing. When Thomas woke briefly, she tentatively mentioned Daniel's offer. His reaction was swift and venomous despite his weakened state. "Working for another man, living under his roof, what kind of fool do you take me for?" His voice cracked with effort. "I'd rather die than see you run off like that." "It's not running off, Thomas. It's surviving," Olivia argued, her patience fraying. "How else will we pay for your treatment? Sell the homestead," Thomas rasped. "But that's our home, our future, worthless land, worthless crop, worthless wife," he muttered, his eyes closing again. "Do what you want, you always do." Olivia sat in silence as Thomas drifted back to sleep. Sell their home. After all they'd endured to keep it, after all the sacrifices she'd made, yet without Thomas's recovery the homestead meant nothing. She would be alone, a woman with no means in a harsh land. By morning her decision was made. With Thomas still unconscious, she spoke with the town's only lawyer, arranging a hasty sale of their property to a land speculator for $60 less than half its value, but enough for Thomas's medical care and train ticket. As the train to Cheyenne prepared to depart, Thomas was loaded onto it on a stretcher, still barely conscious. "Your husband should recover with proper care," Dr. Miller assured her. "Will you be joining him?" Olivia hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I've arranged payment for his care, but I need to secure our future here." The doctor looked at her questioningly but didn't pry further. As the train pulled away, Olivia felt a strange mixture of guilt and liberation. For the first time in years, she stood alone, making her own decisions. The weight of her wedding ring seemed suddenly heavy on her finger. She found Daniel Valentine where he said he would be, at the livery stable preparing to return to his ranch. "I've reconsidered your offer," she said without preamble, "if it still stands." Daniel turned, surprise and something warmer in his eyes. "It does, Mrs. Barrett." "Olivia, please," she replied. "If we're to be employer and employee, we should dispense with formalities." Daniel's ranch was a day's ride from town, situated in a picturesque valley with mountains visible in the distance. It was larger than Olivia had expected, a sturdy main house, a bunkhouse for the handful of ranch hands, a barn and corrals. Cattle dotted the grasslands and a small creek ran through the property. "It's beautiful," she breathed as they approached. "Been building it up for 5 years now," Daniel said with evident pride. "Started with just 20 head of cattle in this land, now we're up to nearly 300 head. The main house was simple but well-maintained, with a large kitchen, a comfortable sitting room, and several bedrooms. It was clean but clearly missing a woman's touch, functional rather than homey. "Your room will be here," Daniel said, showing her to a bright corner bedroom. "Mine's down the hall. The hands eat in the bunkhouse, but I typically take meals here. You'd be responsible for cooking, cleaning, and general household management. I pay $8 a week, plus room and board." $8 a week was far more than Olivia had expected. It would allow her to save, to build something for herself while Thomas recovered. "That's very generous," she said, wondering if there was a catch. "Honest pay for honest work," Daniel replied simply. "We can try it for a month, and if either of us is dissatisfied, no hard feelings." The arrangement felt surreal, but also like a fresh start. Olivia unpacked her few belongings and set to work making dinner, finding comfort in the familiar routine of cooking. That first evening, as they sat across from each other at the kitchen table, Daniel proved to be a surprisingly easy companion. He spoke of his herd, his plans for expansion, and asked thoughtful questions about her own experiences, showing genuine interest in her answers. "How did you come to Wyoming Territory?" he asked as they finished their meal, a stew Olivia had prepared from the well-stocked pantry. Thomas had dreams of homesteading, she replied, the memory bittersweet. We met in St. Louis where I worked in my father's restaurant. Thomas painted such a picture of our future here, land of our own, a thriving farm, children running in the fields. She smiled faintly. Reality proved harsher than the dream. Dreams often do, Daniel agreed, but sometimes reality offers different gifts if we're open to receiving them. His words stayed with her that night as she lay in a bed more comfortable than any she'd slept in for years. What gifts might this unexpected turn offer? And was she brave enough to accept them? Days turned into weeks, and Olivia found herself settling into a routine at the Valentine ranch. She rose early to prepare breakfast, spent mornings cleaning and organizing the house, afternoons baking or mending, and evenings cooking dinner. The work was substantial but satisfying, and for the first time in years her efforts were appreciated. Never tasted biscuits this light, Daniel commented one morning, reaching for a second helping. You're a marvel in the kitchen, Olivia. Such simple praise shouldn't have affected her so deeply, but after years of Thomas's criticisms, Daniel's appreciation was like rain on parched soil. As for Daniel himself, he proved to be a fair and respectful employer. He worked from sunrise to sunset, managing his growing herd and small team of ranch hands with quiet authority. Unlike Thomas, whose failures turned to bitterness, Daniel faced challenges with steady resolve. One evening, about a month after Olivia's arrival, a terrible storm rolled in. Rain pounded the roof, and lightning split the sky as Daniel burst through the door, drenched and worried. The creek's rising fast, he explained, water dripping from his hat and coat. We need to move the cattle to higher ground or we'll lose half the herd. Without thinking, Olivia grabbed her shawl. I'll help. Olivia, no, it's too dangerous, Daniel protested. I'm not made of sugar, I won't melt, she retorted, already pulling on boots. You said yourself every hand counts. Surprise and something like admiration flashed in Daniel's eyes before he nodded. Stay close to me. The storm was fierce, the rain nearly blinding as they worked alongside the ranch hands to drive the frightened cattle uphill. Olivia's dress was soaked through within minutes, her hair plastered to her face, but she pushed on, following Daniel's commands and doing what needed to be done. Hours later, with the herd secured and the worst of the danger past, they returned to the house, exhausted but triumphant. You're full of surprises, Olivia Barrett, Daniel said as they stood dripping in the kitchen. He handed her a towel, his eyes warm with admiration. Not many women would have done what you did tonight. Not many would have been given the chance, she countered, suddenly aware of their proximity and the strange tension between them. That night marked a subtle shift in their relationship. No longer merely employer and employee, they became something closer to partners. Daniel began consulting her on ranch matters, valuing her practical suggestions and clever solutions. 2 months into her stay, a letter arrived from Cheyenne. Thomas was recovering but would need at least another month of care. The hospital required additional funds. Without hesitation, Olivia sent nearly all her saved wages. You're very loyal, Daniel observed that evening, having noticed her mood. He's my husband, Olivia replied simply, though the words no longer carried the certainty they once had. Yes, Daniel agreed, his expression unreadable. But loyalty should be earned, not demanded. His words echoed in her mind as she worked the next day, cleaning the rarely used formal dining room. In a cabinet, she discovered a photograph of a young woman with a gentle smile, the frame dusty but well made. My sister, Clara, came Daniel's voice from the doorway, startling her. She died 5 years ago, typhoid. I'm sorry, Olivia said, carefully replacing the photograph. Were you close? Very. She was to run the household while I managed the ranch. A shadow passed over his face. She believed in this place as much as I did. After she died, I threw myself into making it succeed, but the house, it never felt right without her touch. Is that why you hired me, to replace your sister? No, Daniel said firmly. I hired you because you needed help and I needed help. But I've kept you on because you bring life back to this place, Olivia. You make it feel like home again. The sincere admission hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken meaning. Daniel, Olivia began, but was interrupted by one of the ranch hands calling from outside. A moment of connection broken, leaving both of them with racing hearts and unsaid words. As autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, Olivia found herself dreading Thomas's eventual return. The woman who had arrived at the Valentine Ranch 3 months ago was no longer the same person. Here she had rediscovered her worth, her voice, her joy in simple pleasures. Here she was valued, and then there was Daniel. Steady, kind Daniel who looked at her as if she were something precious, who listened when she spoke as if her words mattered, who never raised his voice or his hand, even when things went wrong. One crisp October evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky, Daniel finally spoke of what had been growing between them. "I find myself in a difficult position, Olivia," he said quietly. "You're a married woman, and I'm a man who respects vows. But I would be lying if I said I haven't developed feelings for you, feelings that go beyond friendship or appropriate relations between employer and employee." Olivia's heart pounded. Part of her had been waiting for this conversation, dreading and longing for it in equal measure. "I've tried to ignore these feelings," Daniel continued. "I've reminded myself daily of the boundaries that must exist between us. But when I see you smile, when I hear you humming as you work, when we talk late into the evening, I find myself wishing for something I have no right to want." "Daniel," Olivia said softly, her own emotions threatening to overwhelm her, "I can't deny I feel something too. But you're right, I made vows. However unhappy my marriage has become, I made a promise before God." Daniel nodded, his expression somber but understanding. "I respect that, Olivia. I would never ask you to break those vows, but I also believe that no one should live a life without love and respect." He reached out, gently taking her hand. "Your husband, he never knew what he had in you, never valued the treasure that was his to cherish." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes at his words. For so long she had been told she was worthless, had begun to believe it herself. To hear the opposite from a man like Daniel shook the very foundation of her beliefs. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know who I am anymore or what I want." "You don't have to decide anything tonight," Daniel assured her, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. "Just know that whatever you choose, you deserve happiness, Olivia. You deserve to be valued for the remarkable woman you are." Next morning, a telegram arrived from Cheyenne. Thomas would be returning on the afternoon train the following day. The moment of reckoning had arrived sooner than expected. Olivia spent that day in a haze of uncertainty, packing her belongings but moving as if through molasses, each item placed in her bag representing a step away from the life she had built at the ranch. As evening fell, Daniel found her sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon. "You're leaving," he said, not a question but a statement of fact. "Thomas is my husband," Olivia replied, though the words felt hollow. "I have obligations." Daniel sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "May I speak plainly, Olivia?" She nodded, knowing whatever he said would only make her decision harder, but needing to hear it nonetheless. "I've seen the shadow that crosses your face when you speak of him. I've noticed how you flinch at sudden movements, how you apologize for things that need no apology." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "I believe you when you say you made vows, but I wonder if Thomas honors his own, to love, to cherish, to respect." Olivia couldn't deny the truth in his words. "Marriage isn't always easy, Daniel." "No, it isn't," he agreed, "but it should never diminish you. It should never make you smaller or afraid or doubt your worth." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Olivia. I didn't plan to, had no right to, but I do. And because I love you, I want you to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include me." The declaration hung in the air between them, honest and raw. Olivia felt tears spill down her cheeks, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "You don't need to say anything," Daniel continued softly. "Just promise me one thing. Before you make your decision, ask yourself what you truly want. Not what you owe, not what's expected, but what would make your heart full." That night, Olivia barely slept, Daniel's words echoing in her mind alongside memories of her life with Thomas. The hope they'd once shared, the dreams that had withered, the slow erosion of her spirit under his constant criticism. By morning, clarity had finally come. She dressed carefully, packed her remaining belongings, and found Daniel in the barn, preparing for the day's work. "I've made my decision," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Daniel straightened, his expression guarded, preparing himself for her departure. "I'm going to meet Thomas at the station," Olivia continued. "I owe him that much to tell him face to face." Confusion flickered across Daniel's features. "Tell him what?" "That I'm filing for divorce." The words, once spoken, lifted a weight she'd carried for years. "I can't return to a life where I'm made to feel worthless. I won't." Hope dawned in Daniel's eyes, but he remained cautious. "Olivia, are you certain? Divorce is scandalous, difficult?" "Yes." She stepped closer to him. "But continuing in a marriage without love or respect would be worse. I've found my voice here, Daniel, found my worth. I can't go back to silence." Daniel's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle as if she might break or disappear. "Whatever you decide, whatever path you choose, I'll support you. If you need time, space, what I need," Olivia interrupted, "is a future where I'm valued, where my contributions matter. Where I can love and be loved in return." She covered his hands with her own. "I believe I've found that here with you, if you'll have me." The kiss that followed was tender, a promise rather than a passion, sweet with the knowledge that time stretched before them, not stolen moments shadowed by guilt. Later that day, Olivia stood on the train platform, her resolve firm despite her racing heart. When Thomas descended, thinner and paler than when she'd last seen him but moving under his own power, she steeled herself for what must be said. Their conversation was painful but necessary. Thomas raged, then bargained, then finally fell silent as she explained her decision. "You called me worthless once too often, Thomas," she said gently. "Until I began to believe it myself, but I know now that isn't true." "It's him, isn't it?" Thomas asked bitterly. "That rancher, you've been unfaithful?" "No," Olivia answered truthfully. "I've honored my vows. But I won't return to a marriage that honors nothing, not my work, not my feelings, not my worth as a person." In the end, faced with her unwavering resolve, Thomas accepted the inevitable. Their parting was not amicable, but it was final. Olivia arranged for him to stay at the boarding house until he could make new plans, provided him with enough money for a fresh start, and walked away without looking back. 6 months later, on a perfect spring day with wildflowers dotting the hills around the Valentine ranch, Olivia became Olivia Valentine in a simple ceremony attended by friends and a few of her family members who had traveled from St. Louis, surprised but supportive of her new beginning. "You know," Daniel said that evening as they sat on their porch watching the stars emerge, his arm around her shoulders and her head resting against him, "I think I loved you from that first day when you insisted on helping with the cattle in that storm. Your strength, your determination, it was like watching someone come alive before my eyes. I was so afraid then," Olivia admitted, "afraid of failing, of disappointing you, of losing the only opportunity I had." "And now?" Daniel asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Olivia smiled, placing her hand over his heart. "Now I'm not afraid of anything, because I know my worth and I know I'm loved." "Beyond measure," Daniel agreed, drawing her closer as the first evening star winked into existence above their home, their true home, built on respect, partnership, and a love that recognized the treasure they had found in each other. As darkness fell completely, Olivia looked up at the vast Wyoming sky, filled with more stars than she had ever believed possible. Like opportunities, she thought, endless and bright, waiting to be recognized. She had found hers here in this place, with this man who saw her value when she had forgotten it herself. And in that knowledge, she found perfect peace.